So it is Wednesday, and of course, on every Wednesday we go to Europe, don't we? All right, so we continue to keep our eyes on the German elections. And this week, the incumbent Angela Merkel and main opposition candidate Martin Schulz engaged each other in a live presidential debate. So what are the issues? Thomas Farrow is back on our screens with more. Hello, Thomas. Good to have you once again.
Nice to be there.
So give us a bit of information on the debate. What sort of issues came up?
Well, that was the only debate, the only televised debate between Angela Merkel and Martin Schulz. The main areas obviously included immigration. There was a big segment on immigration, but there were also other topics that were discussed. Obviously, foreign policy is a major one, social justice, or obviously the issue of security. Those were the four big blocks that the two leading candidates discussed on Sunday. But it's also important, Gifty, to mention that on Monday there was another debate, obviously not with Merkel and Schulz, but with the representatives of the five smaller parties in Germany. And that's particularly important because the five smaller parties in Germany could be, for example, kingmakers when it comes to negotiating future coalitions, or could also be important when it comes to determining what parties will be opposition parties in parliament. So obviously, after the debate on Sunday, after the debate on Monday, the German election campaign is definitely becoming more and more important as obviously the candidates prepare for that all-important day on September 24.
Well, I cited an article online that shows how all the manifestos of these parties have at least a passage about Africa. Now, my question is how prominent the continent has been so far on the parties, all of the parties in this election's agenda going forward.
Well, and Africa, in fact, was also mentioned during the debates. It is mainly linked to migration, mainly linked to politicians' desires to fight the root causes of migration. And in that aspect, obviously, all parties are trying to present their proposals. You know, because we also spoke about this a few weeks ago, that the German government is particularly interested in strengthening cooperation with African countries, for example, when it comes to promoting investment. That's one of the key areas where the German government plans to work in Africa, and that's also been a topic that candidates have been discussing. That's also present in the party programs of the main parties here in Germany. That there is nevertheless a difference between what the parties present in these sort of areas. You have, for example, parties that would like to have not only investment, traditional investment, if you will, and development aid, but also promote private investment. There are parties that say, okay, we can have private investment as well, but that should come with trying to improve the situation for Africans in their own countries and trying to promote job creation. And then you have other extremes where they say that Germany's trade relationship with Africa is under no circumstance fair, and Germany should reorient or reorganize the way it deals with Africa when it comes to trade and when it comes to investment. So you have really a wide range of political opinions and political interests coming from the different German parties that are participating in this election.
Well, some have also said that in this regard, Africa will lose the significance that it has sort of gained with this particular election campaigns. For you, what are the dynamics of this particular school of thought?
Well, I don't think that that will be the case, again, because the topic of Africa and the topic of investment in Africa and compacts with Africa, those partnerships that we've been talking about, are in some way linked to the issue of migration. And the issue of migration is, by definition, and also something that we've seen in certain polls, what Germans believe is the biggest problem the politicians have to face here in the country. So I do see that Africa will continue to be important, but that obviously depends to a certain extent what the next government and what the next parliament will look like. Because in Germany you don't have a system where the winner of the election simply decides everything. In Germany you have a system where the party that wins the election then has to enter into coalition agreements or coalition negotiations with other parties, and that will obviously influence the Africa policy that will come after the election. So that's why it's important to see what the different parties have in their party manifestos when it comes to Africa, and when it comes in particular to these trade relationships with Africa.
Now to my very favorite question, because I do think the politics is really all about the people. What has been the response from the German people following this live television debate?
Well, most people actually didn't think that it changed much. If you ask German people, many of them, at least many of the German people I spoke to, thought that it was a boring debate. I wouldn't describe it at all as boring. I would say it was a very civilized, fact-based debate between the two leading candidates. That was also the case with the next debate the following day among the minor parties. In fact, you had a wide range of topics that were discussed, and that was something that many people also recognized, although some people, again, were critical, for example, of the main debate because they said there's only one debate and many important topics were left out. For example, the topic of education, for example, the topic of environment. So people obviously agree that it was important to see the candidates stand side by side and discuss the main topics, but many people actually didn't think that it changed much. In fact, polls after the debate agreed that maybe Angela Merkel won, although I would say it didn't help Merkel a lot, but it didn't harm her either, and it didn't help Schulz a lot. It didn't harm him either. I think it just reflects the status quo as it is at the moment.
Of it on social media, it's interesting how it all goes down. The countdown is already on to the day of election. And Thomas, thank you so much for bringing us that information all the way from Germany. You just heard from Thomas Sparrow, his political correspondent for our partner DW, right here on The Pulse.